joining me now, therefore, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Mr. Ricardo Martins from iBASIS.
Yes.
There we go. So this session is sponsored by iBASIS. iBASIS are very much in the middle of the messaging world. They have a very long history in the world of voice. And as we heard as well this morning, so much fraud came from the voice world. SMS has followed in behind it. So having that knowledge is very, very helpful indeed when it comes to protecting mobile networks and indeed going on to monetize. So Ricardo, pleasure having you. Thank you to iBASIS for sponsoring this session and enjoy your session.
Okay, thank you, James, for the introduction. Hello to everyone, good afternoon, good morning. Thanks a lot it's very good to be face to face with so many familiar faces. It's good to have a lot of people following us online as well. So my name is Ricardo Martins. I work in iBASIS as VP of Messaging. And I'm here today to speak a bit about monetization, the challenges around monetization. And before jumping into the topic, I would like to introduce my beautiful panel. So here with me I have Joanna Kuligowska.
Yeah, Kuligowska, great.
Joanna.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Joanna Kuligowska. I work for HAUD as Head of Global Market Intelligence and Managed Services, longest job title ever. At HAUD, we are a technology company that creates smart solutions to help the mobile operators take complete control of their messaging lifecycle.
Very well, welcome. And then
Thanks
online,
for having me.
we have Edwin Carvalho. Hey, Edwin.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. Great to see all of you. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Edwin Carvalho. I've been about 15 years in the industry. I now work for one of the biggest CPaaS companies in the space called Vonage, where I'm the Senior Carrier Services Director.
Good, great to have you around. And also, last but not least, Felipe Castillo from GTC. Hi, Felipe.
Hi, Ricardo. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's very good to be here. Well, my name is Castillo. I have worked for a large MNO in Latin America, and now I'm working for Global Telco Consult as a consultant for all the firewall projects.
Okay, very good. So as James mentioned at the beginning, and this has been a very busy day, so we are on the last mile. We have been talking a lot about messaging and the ecosystem, and let's say the challenge or the objective for this session is to look at a specific segment, or I would say one specific focus of the ecosystem, which would be to look at the business opportunity from the mobile side, and what could be the MNO role on taking advantage of the business opportunity. We saw this morning with Nick that the messaging is growing, the spend of the enterprises on messaging is growing. I think, Nick, if I took my notes correctly, we are talking about 26.5 billion, and out of which a big percentage of it is SMS, and out of that bucket, 80%, especially on the SMS side, on the SMS channel, around 80% is a value, let's say a portion of the value chain that is normally captured by the MNOs. So in a landscape where the MNOs have multiple services and multiple challenges, but where voice is decreasing, with roaming revenues have been decreasing with COVID, having this P2P, as also was mentioned this morning, as went down, having this A2P messaging or business messaging as an opportunity, for the point of view of the MNO, is a very interesting opportunity. And I think what we wanted to discuss is how can this be tailor-made for the specifics of each MNO, and honestly speak on very down-to-earth approach of what are the challenges that the MNOs are facing, and probably these challenges are different in LATAM or different in Asia or in Europe. And that's, let's say, basically, I hope that by the end of the session, we all have a bit better understanding of how can we help as part of the ecosystem these monetization strategies. So I think the first question I would raise to all, but probably starting with the ladies, what is the definition of a successful monetization strategy in your view?
It's a lot to unpack in this question, of course, because I think this session is about not one solution doesn't fit all. So a successful monetization strategy can differ from one operator to another. But broadly, I would say that the successful monetization strategy for an operator is the strategy that enables rapid monetization. So normally when we approach a monetization project, we look at recovering of the revenues that have been lost by an MNO to leakage. And that's the first approach is to secure the network, make sure we have full visibility on the traffic that drives actionable insights. And from there onwards, an operator has all the visibility to understand the traffic that is passing through the network and drive actions and perhaps create new revenue streams and tapping into new markets, such as connecting brands or enterprise directly, for instance, or looking into monetizing the traffic streams that haven't been monetized before. And I think the other very important part of this is that a successful monetization strategy is a sustainable one. So very often we talk about the rapid increase of SMS pricing, and that is not necessarily the sustainable strategy for monetization of A2P. We've been talking today about alternative verification methods that are coming more often in markets where A2P tends to increase in A2P rate tends to increase in an exponential way. So I would say successful monetization strategy is an effective and sustainable one. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. And it's curious that you didn't mention straight away it's more revenue, because I think often people tend to associate a successful monetization with more revenue or immediate revenue. And I would ask that as well to Felipe. What do you think is a successful monetization apart from obviously the money part of it?
Yeah, well, I think a successful monetization project is about returning visibility and control to the operator. For many years, operators have been victims of the leakage of the gray roads. So it's about ensuring that the A2P traffic is terminated through reliable partners that meet the quality and security levels that the market requires. So in this way, I think that the operator can guarantee that the traffic that reaches its subscribers complies with all the privacy and data protection regulations while ensuring the business income. I think that's the main definition of a successful project is to provide security to the subscribers and the operator.
Okay. I would add to that note that is also probably to ensure proper connectivity from the enterprises to the MNO, of course, and because not just thinking about the MNO side, and that would make the bridge to ask Edwin his opinion of what is a successful monetization approach or strategy on your view.
Well, I think I run the risk a little bit of repeating Felipe and Joanna, but I would say a successful monetization project or strategy is one that, first of all, protects the subscriber from all the nasty stuff, from spam, from smishing, from everything else. Gives that visibility to the MNO so that they can get back the power and control and monetize accordingly, but in the right way. So not overcharging, understanding the industry, understanding that increasing too much the price might mean leakage happens in different ways. Also one that follows regulation in the country, which I think is often forgotten, but it does need to be an important part to a successful monetization strategy.
No, it's curious that you speak about regulation, and that brings me to the next question. Let's say normally, if we talk about a monetization project, you can actually split it in 3 stages. The beginning, or the preliminary stage, or what we call the qualifying stage, the actual implementation, and then the full operation. So in your view, Joanna, what's the relevancy of a qualifying stage, and what are the mistakes an MNO should try to avoid when looking at the challenges that can happen before you actually start to implement a project like this?
A monetization project. Yeah, I think channeling to what Edwin said, what you said, regulation is a big part of that. In many markets, operators have to follow regulations, and they sometimes impose significant limitations or what can be done in terms of filtering of messaging or blocking even, and that means that research of research has to be done before the project is launched, but also a certain education part should be happening between the operator and the regulatory. We've seen some markets where there is not enough regulatory support to impose blocking. There's a lot of fraud, for instance, happening that obviously impacts the subscriber in specific markets. Even in Europe, in some markets where we cannot apply content filtering, then we see smishing and flu-bot going up the roof. So I think that part has to be done, and that will set the expectations in terms of monetization as well, because of course a lot of things can be done without being able to fully enforce monetization strategy, but it will never be 100% optimized, or just you cannot maximize it to the level of the operator expectations, if you will. I think this is important, and I think another very important part that operators should take into account is be honest about your internal resources that can be dedicated to the project, because sometimes the timelines and the expectations when it comes to actual monetization effects, they must be rescheduled due to some significant delays based on simply not enough resources to be assigned on the operator side. So I think these are big challenges on the qualifying stage, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think you make a very important point, because I think MNOs have to realize that monetization project is not just setting up a firewall. The fact that you set up an SMS firewall doesn't qualify you to start a monetization strategy, and that's very often overlooked or undervalued. And I think that's where iBASIS and HAUD and other players in the ecosystem can bring value to the MNOs. And I would like to ask Felipe, also based on your experience on the different regions and on the ground implementation, how do you value these challenges that from the MNOs that can go from the technical side, resources, regulation, as was mentioned? What's your experience on the ground? And how can you assess these challenges?
Well, in my experience, I think the main barrier to monetization project is the local regulation. There's not a defined standard, and each regulator often defines the rules differently according to their interpretation of the business. For example, I have seen countries here in Latin America where it's allowed to monitor and block the mode traffic, but no action can be taken on the empty traffic. And in the same region, the next country, the opposite, of course. The empty traffic can be blocked, but not the mode traffic. Okay, so I think in several countries, the regulation is an obstacle to monetization. In Chile, for example, the regulation prevents the operators from blocking roads that are considered non-legitimate, while in Ecuador, For example, is the opposite case. The regulator supports the operator even with a legal claim against people or companies that use railroads. So in the past, when I worked for Telefonica, we sent to the jail to many people that installed SIM boxes across the country. So it depends. It's more challenging in some markets than others, but I think my recommendation to an operator that that wants to start a monetization project is to guarantee that population allow monetization and content analysis, because it's the main obstacle.
Yeah, and Edwin, taking on this point, do you think, let's say, the regulators or the legal regulatory framework in the countries are an obstacle or can be an ally? And what is the role of the operators, of the MEF, on educating and raising the awareness and trying to set some type of standards? Is there anything else we could do on that regard, in your view?
Well, personally, I think in some countries the regulator is an ally, while in others it's absolutely an obstacle. And Felipe gave two very good examples: Chile, and similar to Chile, where it's an obstacle, you have countries like Thailand and Australia, where again it's an obstacle. While in others like Ecuador, but I can also say Vietnam, the regulator is an ally, where they actually implemented, for example, in Vietnam, they forced the MNOs to implement a firewall to protect their subscribers. So it's a little bit of a hit and miss, and it's a mix mash. In terms of the MNOs, the truth is the regulators have some knowledge of the market, but they don't have their hands in the industry in the same way an MNO does. Organizations like MEF, but also the MNOs, they have a big role in educating, explaining, showing data, and understanding why implementing a firewall, but not just a firewall, firewall's just as good as the team managing it, can actually help the subscribers, because ultimately that's the mandate of a regulator. It's to protect the subscribers and protect the industry. So there's a lot of education that needs to happen from the MNOs and from trade bodies like MEF, from CPaaS companies such as Vonage, from consultants such as GTC, Felipe, etc., to help the regulator make the right decisions, to make them clear in their country, so that ultimately the subscriber wins.
Yeah, thank you. I like your sentence of having the information to making the right decisions, and I think that's also a clear benefit of a monetization strategy. Before you can have a strategy, you need information, and what let's say a full package service, as we call it. So you set up a firewall, you start analyzing the traffic, and not only you protect the network, you protect fraud, but you also giving visibility and full knowledge to the MNO about the traffic is terminated in the network. When we are talking with MNOs, they don't know how much traffic they have, local, international. They have no idea about the traffic per brand. So without this information, how can they set a proper pricing strategy or proper monetization strategy? And I think that's one of the main benefits, and probably it's not so much everyone thinks about revenues, we speak about fraud, but also this knowledge and full visibility of the traffic profile. I think it's very important. And this brings me to the next question is, once you have this information, how can you set, I would say a proper pricing model or a monetization strategy that can combine the two visions of this ecosystem? So on one side you have the MNO's wishes and interests, but at the same time it has to fit with the enterprises and the OTTs and that are looking for long-term pricing stability and this type of things. So how it's, in your view, the best pricing model or pricing strategy to get this win-win?
It's a really difficult question, Ricardo.
I know, if it would be easy, I wouldn't.
I think we should have a panel just on pricing. Wow, it's a lot. But I think, again, we have to go back to where we started. There's no one model fits all, and there are different. Like we just had this discussion before we started the panel, and I asked my favorite analyst, Nick Lane, what does he think what an SMS should cost, and he said something very, very, very wise. Whatever brand is willing to pay, and that can differ from one market to another. That can differ for a global enterprise that wants to do verification of a user and treats SMS as a part of the cost of user acquisition simply. Perhaps it's worth more than a local brand in the developing market that is trying to use SMS as engagement channel or marketing channel. These are two very different use cases. However, what we've seen traditionally in majority of the markets is that the SMS has been quite straightforward when it comes to pricing. I had same pricing, one fits all, one rate for all SMS. And I think this model, personally, I think this model is outdated, and it's one of the reasons that in some markets, for instance, the A2P use cases are not growing because of not correct pricing strategy, for instance, on the domestic traffic, and then some use cases are shifting to cheaper or more elastic in terms of pricing channels of communications. I'll mention a market quite large and I think close to everyone's heart, Indonesia, for instance, where we see the domestic SMS is not growing year on year as exponentially as it should be growing, because it has been traditionally quite expensive to maintain parity between international and domestic rate, which results in lots of WhatsApp being used to facilitate business communication. And the adoption of WhatsApp is unprecedented in this market. And for instance, in the UK, to give an example, we see the same use cases booming on SMS because of the rate being fitting the model of a UK enterprise. It's a challenging question. I think we should get rid of there is just one pricing model for SMS type of thinking and move into how SMS can become more elastic and even have maybe more conversational or different pricing model. And that, I believe, with the right technology in place, can stimulate new use cases. I understand that operators very often have fear of cannibalization, but that can be resolved with technology, I believe. And again, we come back to visibility and enables that action and insights. And once you know the traffic that is passing through the network, that you can find the right strategies to monetize the right traffic streams. Wow, I didn't think I answered your question, did I? It's a complex question. I'm really interested in what the others would say. But I think, to summarize, I don't think there is one pricing fits all strategy, as simple as that.
Yeah. Okay, Edwin, let's say, taking the same question to you, so what is the secret sauce or the magic formula? I would like also you to reflect, if you can share your view with us about this position from the enterprises or specifically the OTTs that probably in the past they were used to use gray routes or to have, terminate messages at below 1 cent and 2 cents, and suddenly the market goes to 10 cents, 12 cents, 8 cents. So is there a common ground to be found that there is a fair price to be paid, or basically they will tailor-made their channels according to the cost? What's your view? What could be the win-win scenario in terms of the business model?
Well, I do agree that it is quite a complex question, and it's difficult to cater or find a solution that pleases both MNOs and the OTTs. There does need to be communication between both sides, and MNOs do need to listen to what the OTTs are saying. Of course, with a pinch of salt, because OTTs will always say that cheaper is better, but there is some form of middle ground. Now, we do see today that OTTs are moving to other channels. They have more options today than they did before, and especially in countries with high smartphone penetration rates, the MNOs, the OTTs can use email, they can use push notifications, etc. I think there is a middle ground. Too much of a complex pricing model is also not good. And we see the markets like Vietnam, where there's many different pricing depending on the use case, depending on type of customer.
The microphone. We were hearing you with a lot of interference. Should we?
We're having some technical issues here in the room.
Let's have Felipe jump in, and then we resume with that. Felipe, what could be your take? And let's say, how can we challenge this balance between the OTTs and the MNOs that have found the new holy grail, which is the monetization of the A2P traffic?
So I'm just going to jump in quickly whilst we try and get the microphones fixed. So I've got a question for both of you. Let me come up here properly so I'm not blocking stage. What resistance do you come up against internally within mobile network operators when you talk about monetization? You talk about there's a great opportunity here, not just in terms of money, adding customer stickiness, etc., etc. What resistance and where does it typically come from within mobile operators?
I think
because it's not an easy sell, this, is it?
No, but it's, let's say, I have an immediate answer that pops in my mind is the technical resistance and or the, let's say, the internal teams that is in charge of the anti-fraud or the fraud or the monetization, they feel threatened. And I think that's very important to make everyone, or the MNOs, aware, and that's what iBASIS tries to do, is that it's not about the technical expertise of that team, which is awesome. It's all about the market know-how and let's say the global view we have about the problem. Because in the moment you set up a firewall, it's no longer updated. No. And everything has to be kept, maintained, updated. And you know, if we have let's say, if we are on the aggregation space, if we have other firewalls installed everywhere, let's say elsewhere, it's very easy to get synergies and to get market intelligence and market knowledge reflected on the configuration of that specific OPCO. And the technical team cannot bring that value. And that's what, I think that's the main challenge.
It's a real tough one. Just test. Felipe, can you just speak to see if we're okay? Are we fixed?
Okay, so...
We're back in
Can
action.
you hear me now?
I'm off.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, great.
Very good question. So, Felipe, probably you...
Do you want me to come back? Do you want to turn it around? I'll moderate and you can speak now.
If you can also answer the question of James, I think it's very interesting and I think it's very close to your heart. What are the challenges or the resistance of the MNOs when we are trying to explain how good the solution is?
I think it's a lack of knowledge about the business. You know, a lot of operators, they don't trust what you are promising to them. We know that we can achieve all the goals that we are proposing, but it's not easy for the operators to believe it, because they have been fighting for years with the business and the revenues are not increasing. They don't have any idea of how the firewall works or how we can help them to cut the gray roads. And they simply, they don't believe. They think that we are selling smoke. They think that we are not being honest with the operator, but that's why it's so hard to get to the people inside of the operator. But once you can convince them that you know what are you doing and you know how to help them, I think the things are quite easy. But this first step is the most challenging.
And we have tools like let's say the penetration tests or the monetization efficiency reports that I think are very impacting and very helpful in showing that. And hopefully the sound of Edwin is also fixed, right?
I guess so.
Okay, good.
You tell me. Yeah.
So coming back to that $1 million question, what's the win-win scenario between the OTTs and the MNOs? Because you are doing great, but we didn't understand anything. So if you can repeat.
Sure. So I might say some different things right now, but
we wouldn't know anyway.
So definitely the MNOs need to listen to the OTTs. Of course, take it, with a pinch of salt, because the OTTs will always say they need a cheaper price, but they do need to hear what the OTTs are saying. OTTs have many different types of traffic. They have their 2FA traffic, they have their marketing traffic, notifications, etc. And some of these streams are at risk because the ROI is just not there for the OTTs anymore. And the MNOs, at the end of the day, sometimes are doing a disservice to themselves by just increasing the price to whatever they want. They might be losing out on revenue because it just means that the OTTs cancel certain streams of traffic. This is even more at risk because there's more channels every day coming on board. And especially in markets where the smartphone penetration is quite high, OTTs are more and more using things like push notifications. They can send emails to the subscriber because the subscriber will have a smartphone and he'll receive the emails at that second and can read it in real time as well. So these streams are at risk, and the MNOs need to think really very hard about how they price subscribers. Going to Joanna's point, I think there needs to be some elasticity and some different pricing models, but it can't be too complex. What we see in some markets like Vietnam, where there were many different types of pricing depending on the type of subscribe or the type of message, or even in some markets that are simpler, you just have domestic versus international, but then you need pre-registration on domestic. This is harmful for the market. Many small companies, they just don't have the size and they can't manage the effort of pre-registering each sender, and that means that there's traffic that doesn't come to life, and the growth then is capped. So it needs to be thought about quite seriously, and maybe there's something where there's a default price, but then some exceptions for certain streams of traffic, marketing and notification by big senders, but trying to keep it simple is very important.
Very valid point. Yeah, I think we heard about this increasing of regulations imposed by the operators in order to mitigate also the fraud. It actually totally impacts the ubiquity of SMS and being such a simple channel for brands to use. So I think it's a very important point that Edwin has made. Yeah.
Okay, and I think we are approaching the end, and we also need to save some time for questions. So my last question would be, and this is for all, so what's the advice, Felipe, you would give to an MNO for implementing a long-term and sustainable monetization strategy, as Joanna mentioned at the beginning?
Well, I think the quality of the service is the key. Ensuring that the firewall rules are precise and do not affect the traffic of local users or local companies is essential. I think providing quality managed service and effective penetration testing will ensure long-term project success. Similarly, avoiding service interruption due to technical failures in the SMS firewall is critical. The fines that the regulator imposes on the operators for the interruption of the service are critical in many countries. And if one of these fines is imposed on the operator due to failure in the SMS firewall, it may compromise the project. So I have seen it in the past that some monetization projects starts in a good way, but in the past, the managed service doesn't work properly, and they start blocking real subscribers or domestic traffic, and everything become a mess. So I think the quality of the service during all the period of the project is essential.
Okay, Edwin, on your side, what would be, I know advices, if they were good, that we would sell it, not give them for free, but in any case, what's your suggestion to the MNOs?
Beyond what Felipe mentioned, quality of service has to be flawless. I think it's very important that MNOs don't take their eye off the ball, and a good monetization isn't just a firewall. You need to have a good team, you need to have good processes, and you need to keep on it every day to ensure that the quality remains. Second, I would tell MNOs to really understand what trends are there on the market. There's other services, other solutions, other ways to authenticate users. There are flash calls, SMS, TTS, push notifications. So understand how that's affecting their A2P business. And third, understand the market needs, make the pricing reasonable, adjustable. I think that's very key for an MNO to understand.
Joanna, your take.
Yeah, first of all, right partnership is essential. That's what the guys have been saying. I mean, might be controversial coming from technology vendor, but the firewall is a box, so it's only worth as much as it's being managed. I understand there are always challenges for the operators, but it's a partnership, so it takes time to build that level of trust, and I think and an operator embarks on the journey to partner up with the right partner. It's about forming the right trust, so it's about collaboration and communication, open communication from both sides. I think very important, aligning the internal teams together within the operator environment. So it's about education, internal education to your teams within the operator to make sure that everyone understands the purpose of the solution and there are no internal misunderstandings and conflicts. And also external education to the regulatory that can support the optimization of monetization or maximization of the monetization. So also in markets where where the regulatory is not favoring SMS firewalls, for instance, it comes down to this education coming from MNOs themselves as well. How can this really help protecting the subscribers? And again, going back to the pricing strategy, I think coming with a price strategy that fits your particular market. And operators should know exactly what is perhaps achievable on the domestic side, but then listen to your partner and that market intelligence that they bring on board, saying, okay, what is achievable and what type of rate can become a sustainable pricing model for not a short-term 3 months cashing out and that's it, but that 3, 5, 6 years to come that will actually stimulate A2P growth, not stimulate a bypass and switching to alternative verification methods. So that's my take.
Yeah. I fully agree, and I think my key take on this is also, I think the expression you used was partnership, and I think it's a lot of common sense and thinking this on long term. I think the market is full of bad examples on both sides, either on the MNO or on the aggregators, that the 1 year commitment to make the money burn, that's not a long-term strategy. And with all the challenges and all the value that we see that business messaging has, the MNOs should understand that having the right partnership in place, the partners that can bring skills and market intelligence and resources, most of the cases at a very low investment, not to say at zero capex or zero opex solutions. So there are multiple models, and the MNOs should use this opportunity to once and for all to take the long-term successful monetization approach. And that's, I know we are 8 minutes for questions.
Yeah. Wow. Exactly. So I'll manage this part. Thank you very much. So do we have any questions in the room? No. We have. Mariola from Tele2 Group.
I was wondering, what is the worst that MNOs can do in terms of setting prices? What we should never do?
I would say not just setting prices, but also probably volume expectations. I think probably not a very clever thing is to launch an RFP where 6 or 7 aggregators will come and asking for a commitment of a ridiculous amount of traffic that has no stickiness to the reality. because that will generate a huge conflict of interest. And when you don't have an alignment of interests between the partner and the MNO, you create problems. And I think that in terms of the price, I will leave for my colleagues to mention. But I think not only the price, but the volume level as also very...
If I may, I think MNO should avoid severe market pricing disruption. That is never a good thing. I think in market intelligence, whenever we approach a project, we look at what is the market, who are the markets neighboring, charging, what is achievable in this specific market.
What's the starting point?
What's the starting point? I think what an operator shouldn't be doing, because it might be ill-advised or just having unrealistic expectations, is to disrupt the market, because that really incentivizes disruption on the other side. And I think maybe Edwin can provide his feedback, but from the enterprise point of view, the worst that can happen is it disrupts their budgets for HP spend as well. And what we want collectively is for brands to spend more on SMS messaging, and if that disrupts the budgets half through the financial cycle, that it can create panic and switching off some of the use cases. And of course, we want to achieve the opposite of that.
Any more
I
questions?
would add beyond that, just the timing, not to do a pricing change from today to tomorrow. Give 30 days notice, allow the enterprises to adjust. I would add that point.
Yeah, I also will mention empathy with the aggregators, because sometimes the operator, they just set up a new price, but they don't know the reality of the aggregators. Maybe the aggregator, they have a compromise price with a customer for a long time, and the operator, they don't know about it. And it's sad, because I have seen sometimes in the local markets how small aggregators, they just go to bankruptcy, because the operator put the price without understanding the reality. And I think that the worst mistake an operator could make is about the price is to define a highest price for the market, and don't take into account their partners. The aggregators are partners, and they have to think on them too.
Any other questions in the room? We've got a question here.
Hi. And just one question. Let's imagine the ideal situation where the monetization has been established successfully, and the traffic is flowing, and we've done all of the right things. Each one of you has a different view on how to deal with the trashing, should that happen. So it will be very interesting for me to hear your views on how do you deal with that, and how do you protect the MNO?
Can we first explain for the online audiences what message trashing is?
Yeah, so message trashing is when a brand sends 10 messages, but along the way, one aggregator or others, regardless, one entity decides to drop 2 or 3 messages, and at the operator side, the MNO only monetizes 7. So it means 3 messages are trashed or dropped or not routed.
It's now estimated at least 10% globally happening.
I think, let's say, a lot of what was said before explains why trashing happens. Again, if there is no alignment of interests, and those type of things can happen. If you communicate with 30 days your pricing strategy, if you select or if you try to have a closest path between the source of the traffic and the termination, and you try to work with trusted partners, probably you mitigate that risk.
Yeah, and I would add execution always. No policy has any value without execution. So, yeah, focusing on the right partnerships and applying those best practices, but also when trashing happens, I think it should be penalized. It should be called out, and I think it's not necessarily maybe happening enough right now because it should be classified as fraud. And I think without that execution and then reacting to it, this is just best practice.
Thank you. Any other questions in the room? We've got a little bit of time here. Anything online? No? I've just got one. I could have multiple, but I won't. You know me, Ricardo. I've just got one of my own. So how important is it to get the strategy organised with the MNO before embarking? Because there are multiple ways an MNO can go about monetizing. You can choose. They can choose a partner that can do everything. So they could choose a partner that is an aggregator, has the technology as well, is a firewall provider, is everything. Or they could go with a partner that is the technology provider, has an expert managed service, but is not the aggregator. So they're different. People ask 100, you've probably got 50 in each camp. How important is it, though, to establish from the get-go, right at the beginning with the operator, to be clear that these are the strategies, so you don't end up in the situation where an operator changes at the last minute?
Yeah, I think that, let's say, when we talk about the relevancy of the qualifying stage, we are talking exactly about that. So where we sit down with the operator and we explain the options and we agree with them, because we don't bring a solution one fits all. We will tailor-made the monetization strategy to his needs and to his wishes. At the end of the day, it's his network. And just to give you a very specific example, we speak about domestic international. There's a definition that says international is a brand with headquarters outside the country. But for whatever reason, there is a bank which happens to be international, but the operator wants to consider it local, it's their network. So, and I think the solution, at least on our side, is to be flexible and actually tailor-made the solution to the requirements. If he wants to be more involved on the technical side, less involved. If he wants to be more involved on the pricing decisions or less involved, at the end, it's his network. And we are here to support them on executing a proper strategy. So,
all you can do is show you've got all these relevant use cases, practical use cases. The same with Felipe from Global Telco Consult. That's your job to do that. And Edwin as well at Vonage. I know you've had a lot of experience. And of course, Joanna, that's your everyday job too. So yeah, I think so. That's it. So thank you very much to iBASIS for sponsoring this panel. It's been absolutely fantastic. So Ricardo, you did a great job moderating. It's your first time ever in the moderator's chair.